It's just summertime crickets, isn't it? Forget about the woes of the world. Ignore them. You haven't seen sun for 6 months, so now you got to get out there like lizards and get all warmed up, get blistered, just to feel like you're alive. You got the woes of the world on you in order to got to keep going because you haven't really seen the sun, haven't really looked out. Probably blind you anyway with what they're doing to it. And this was BTW RLM 215. And we continue to hear the crickets. And I open this broadcast every day that I come here to say that, and y'all know about it, and you're all bored with it, I'm sure. And yet I don't see anybody in any numbers stepping up. Although, on the horizon, I hear the drums being beat that something has to be done, and we have to get together, and that's cool. And that's what I've been saying here. Find the wrong you want to make right, and go at it. Take your skills and your set and focus on it. And I was, just as I had a flash in my mind where I was going to start, I wanted to maybe touch something else. And I don't know how much I can discuss it, as far as, because it's been 2 hours now since they were talking about it over on UCY.TV and Ron Stevens. I'm going to get that. Well, I'll talk with Ron eventually, and I'll get that name from him, but never settles. They were talking about a court case that's going on up in Canada. And I was thinking about it, I hear the people talking. It's kind of getting late in their case to move what they're doing, but it always impresses me how little we actually know what we need to do. And everybody really has the answer, but we don't know how to speak into that system that's destroying us. And so I'm hesitant to say much, and not as a criticism. I'm really wanting to be more actually more helpful, not sounding like a critique, like I know it all, because I don't, but I do know some things. And we need to change. We need to understand how to address this occupation. I can't see it anything else. If you don't know, if you have to speak essentially a foreign language to speak to someone in your own country, that should tell you something. And this legal, lawful thing, that's an indication. There's lots of indications, but we don't really take it to heart. And there's a lot of people that have done things and protected themselves, and to all of y'all that have done that, great. But you need to step up and say, okay, this is the thing I've done. When you hear a case, you need to step up and say, this is what I've done in this case. And this is how I won, and this is what it was about. And don't exaggerate what you did, because it may not hold for the new case. But they're talking about going after raw milk. And to me, it all relates back down to the foundation of the law of the land. Now, my problem is it's out of Canada. And I don't remember all their names, and I apologize. I should really know more of this stuff. It just doesn't come to me. Names are there's just so much other things I keep in my mind. I think I keep the concepts of the problem in my mind, and I lose the people then. And I don't mean to lose the people. I think Michael was the farmer who's underneath this big lawsuit, injunction, if I understand correctly. But I heard a lot of logic coming, a lot of common sense, if I can use the word common in the way that it's supposed to be and not the way they've been adulterating. Not the commons and not the community has possession of your property, but the common sense, the horse sense, as I was explained we should maybe call it. And it's not horse sense. So here we go. See how this works? At any rate, listening to all the logic and all the reason and all the things, I'm thinking, this is very powerful evidence, but you have to reduce it to evidence, not a statement. And then, most importantly, what they have to understand, and what everyone has to start to understand, is not what you know about something, but how to address the remedy that's come against you, or the one you need to affect. And what I heard, let me see if I can put this in how do I approach this? Because we don't know all the facts and all, but what I was hearing was pretty powerful things. The remedy that's used against the raw milk farmer is an injunction, as I understand it. Well, what was coming up against them is the corruption of the system. And I told you in our lawsuit, you have to understand how to defeat that. You have to go after that. Well, and they use the most powerful tools they have, what the government has. Even if, I don't stop to understand the conversation about it being a corporation is irrelevant here, because they have the power. It's not irrelevant if you take that and turn it around and apply that as a conflict of interest, as Ron did state. He goes, "This is the public is not the people. It's the corporation. It's the government. Public means government now. It's the government interest." But they're talking in a police power sense. You have to strip them to that. That's very, very difficult, but you can do it. And so I'm hearing, and then they talked about utilizing science up against them. The people coming in to make the claim are using so-called science, and this is the new religion that is used to defeat us, and it's not science at all. I've explained to you what it all is. Not all, but a lot of what it is. It's literally just using a term to obfuscate a political agenda lobbying. And so here's the point. Once you know that, now what do you do with that? You call them out, you call them names, or do you take the fact, you produce the fact of that, enter it into the evidence of the case against you, and show that they're committing under the color, they're using this pretense of the authority to come in and show it as a pretense and show that the science is not actual. And you start to whittle at this side, you're whittling away at what they're bringing. That's after the fact. But the point is you can go after the science, and customs, traditions, and usages can go defeat a science. But even better than that, you find out that there's, lots of people like this, and the government's coming in, or whoever these people are, under the government's police powers, using the police powers. You have to go understand what police powers are. And just quick, and again, I'm really hesitant to say a bunch of this because it's not the silver bullet and it's not the whole answer. It's just too summary to get into, but it leads us into a place to, I guess for me, it's showing us how we don't respond right. We make the comment, this is powerful stuff, but it needs to be put in the proper context in order to use it as a defense mechanism, a shield. For 5,000 or more years, we've been using raw milk. That's a custom, a tradition, and a usage. That can defeat science. 5,000 years and we're still here. But you have to use it against their police power. Their police power is saying, "But this'll kill you." What I found interesting is a woman was saying that in some context that there was the people that were around these green farms, wind power farms. It was all in their minds they were sick, and yet she was making a claim that the raw milk will kill. Well, okay, maybe that's in your mind that raw milk kills. So I would use that back around, but more importantly, they're using that in a police power context in order to say it kills generally. It kills the general population. What am I saying? Police powers has to do with an area-wide affliction. How do you use that? Well, you show that the assertions of the area-wide affliction are not in evidence. They're making opinionated statements, which might be caused by the wind farm they live by. They aren't bringing the evidence to show that the police powers can be invoked in their case. In other words, to show you the police powers works, and you'll see how mandatory it is when you get involved with one. You mandatorily have to evacuate. And you find out not everyone has to if they just don't consent to it. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't, because maybe it's a wise thing to move. When a fire's coming down on you and you can't defeat it, maybe it's a good thing to get out of there. Maybe you might want to take some wise counsel there. But a fire is one of the police powers that one of the conflagrational issues that the demonstrable exigencies that the government can step in and say, "Listen, we need to take care of this. You need to get out of here." But it's an area wide and it's temporary. That's the other evidence. So, how do you take all this stuff? Well, if it's a 5,000-year usage and no one's died, the status quo and an injunction has to be upheld. It's not the public interest where they haven't shown it. It's the status quo of the tradition, the custom, and the usage. They have to overthrow that by evidence. So you have to defeat them on their area-wide use of police power. You have the words, you're just not utilizing to do that. How did I offered that in the chat, a UCY chat, UCYTV.chat, chat tango, I think it was. And I said, you have to show that they have to produce an area-wide effect. In fact, they had to produce evidence to show that people got killed by raw milk that was produced by the singular farmer. So that what the overall thing that they're after is to destroy the whole entire industry. What the problem is that they've made a claim. It's a pretext of police power, which you have to defeat. It isn't an area-wide issue, and it doesn't come from this farm. Are the two positions you put to dissolve that injunction, because the status quo was improperly imposed. The status quo is not the public interest that hasn't been shown. The status quo was the farmer being able to produce from the land that he has exclusive right of possession of. And this is where I get a little hesitant, because I don't know what happens in land in Canada. The farmer has to be able to show he does have an exclusive right. Now, they'll come in with the police power on food, but you have to show that out of that farm there was no area, they have not caused an area-wide concern. Theirs is just pretense. Why am I keeping saying the pretense or pretext? It's because they're coming under the state authority, which is a color of authority imposition on a right, the production of your land. My other comment was, produce evidence, require they produce it. The other side, the claim produce evidence in the injunction they want, that the people in the area have access to that production. And my understanding, and I could be wrong, is it's a private access. In other words, the public access, the general, and I don't mean public and the corporate access, even though it can mean this way as well. I mean the general men and women of the people in the area don't have access, can defeat the police power imperative. And so I was hearing lots of good conversation, but it's not turned to, as I called it in the chat, the elements required by the claimant to prove, and how to defeat those elements so that they can't move forward. Police power is a very difficult one, but I think, I've been able to see how it's defeatable in land, coming from land disposal law and the appurtenant rights, the appurtenances of this land, what we get to use. It was disposed to produce. It was disposed to produce food. How can they come in and say that food was no good? That's another thing you put in. You don't say that. You require they prove out their title to the land to interfere with your right to produce the food. And so it's a multi-step process. I work kind of backwards. But you get to the fact that you have them say, this can't be an injunction. They haven't shown title to the land to be able to interfere. Now so they're coming under the color of a title. They're committing a felony, extortion or coercion, and other crimes against the property owner who has the right to produce. And I'm saying this under the United States law, where we have the right to produce, and then you get to the police powers, and no one seems to argue that one either. And I'm offering you how that would work and how we've done it, how they try to do it against the miners, and how, we got a health and safety issue, and they can't produce the fact of it. And I call that a color of authority and position that has no title to do so, and that's a felony. And so you convert back what they're doing as a felony pretext. Don't accept it as something you have to answer and argue with. So I guess I don't know quite how to say. What I hear is pretty cool stuff. What it's not doing is it's not addressing the underlying requirements of a claimant coming against you to defeat them. And it has to be reduced to evidence. And they have the requirement to show that first you have to reestablish that the status quo was the raw milk use. Then you can defeat them on their police powers after you show that they don't have title. Now, I can't say you defeat them because now you're still in that corrupt system. But now if you jump over to Ron Stevens or Stefan's opinion, his observation, I should say, that the public means government and that it means the protection of corporate milk and boards, the government boards. Now you've got a conflict of interest coming into the system. You can take out the judge. You'd have to have a quo warranto how he's not a part of that system and not a part of the endeavor to undermine the rights pertinent to the property, the land, which is the production of food, which was under customs, traditions, and usages existent for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So you have to have them show into evidence. You demand them to show. You don't say it. You say they have failed this element. You have to, and there's no evidence for it. You don't make the argument. You produce their failure, I guess is one quicker way to say all this. And I hope I'm making some sense here. I know it's one-sided, but I put some things in that chat, and I asked that it be forwarded on to Ron so they can forward it on and think about it. Again, these are have to be just suggestions. But if we don't understand, we keep making the wrong arguments. It's not much different at all than the DAPL, but in a different subject matter area and under different authorities. But the principles underlying how you address these things coming against us are pretty much all the same. You have to defeat the police power that they're bringing, but if you defeat it, then you can turn it as a pretense that puts them into a position of felony. It's like playing chess in a way. If they don't have title to the land and now they're using that color of authority of the title they haven't omitted to admit, that's another felony. As a joke, I would twist their own logic against them. Well, she must live near a power supply place, a green power supply place that affects her, and it's all in her mind that this milk can kill people. Where's the evidence? Dismiss. Where's the evidence? They're just making assertions without evidence. And we can show that their reason for doing this is a crime. It's a conflict of interest with the corporations they agree that they license. So then now they're on the hook as well, because now it's a conflict of interest. If the milk growers, the pasteurization companies go down and the government goes down for not being able to prove this, it makes the government look bad. And so you build up a whole scenario of why this thing is improper before the court, and the court is improper. Because let me put it out this way. Where is the court's title to question the production appurtenant to land rights? Now, I kept saying this word appurtenant. It became a problem. Appurtenant just means pertaining to, connected to, typically land, the way we're talking here. But appurtenant is anything that's pertaining to the subject matter. That became a problem. That word alone became a problem. But that's okay. Get a dictionary. I can't, chats are hard to describe. I use the word that I knew would need to be used, and you need to be consistent with what you're saying. There's no long-winded way no need to go long-winded on this explanation. The right to make milk, raw milk, and stop using the word raw milk. Say something else. I mean, I would say they're mischaracterizing what you make. They call it raw milk because the statute has a problem with raw milk. Stop calling it raw milk. I don't know what you'd call it. A suggestion was made, real milk. Maybe they've taken a copyright on the word milk. You better look into that. See, that board, that association may have taken a legal claim over the word milk. You can't use that word. That might be your problem. Prove it's milk. Prove it's raw milk. And you hold them to their constrained definitions. If there isn't one, then they have no standard. Okay, that's an just as I said that's an interesting approach to go as well. What I'm talking about here is going against the requirements, the process, and defeating them at every turn by any excuse they bring. It's not about what you know, and it's not about how much you can say about what you know, and it's not about, I know that it went for 5,000 years. It's taking that fact, putting it in, and utilizing it in a case in the proper way. In this case, I would assert that as the tradition, usage, and custom, and I'd put it in and say there is no evidence to refute this as the status quo. That establishes that it was that thing. And that also, if you listen carefully, if it's been the general usage, trade, and custom, you've defeated the public police powers in that statement where they can't prove. I see a lot of names coming in the chat. I appreciate you all listening. The term natural milk, fresh milk, P. Bunyan and Vinny come up, and I just have a little line, so I'm not looking at the whole chat. I just have to see how line go through. What if they've copyrighted without your knowledge milk? The term milk. The milk is now a term that they control. You can't even call it that. So we have to really look carefully at what they're doing and what they've claimed, and we have to take cognizance of that. And if you want to disregard that, they'll beat you there. I'll just tell you that much. But we have to take our knowledge. This is what I say. Knowledge is not the power. It's how you use that knowledge. It's all important. And when you get into a legal system, you bring the law. And you show they can't touch. You can't touch this. All right? You're legal. You can't touch this. But you got to know the knowledge. The power is in how you go about doing that. Again, the caveat. Is that a silver bullet? No. But when you start laying it out this way, you start to defeat all of them. You defeat their authority. You defeat the underlying authority of a judge to question your right to make the milk. Now, here's another extension. They'll say, and they were getting into it, and I can watch these guys in that government. They're pulling at every straw they can find because that's all they got left. Now they went into, you can pull the milk out and you can't put it in a glass or drink it or move it or put it ever. They're trying to get you to say you're in commerce. Well, you have a private contract, you defeat. Show the commerce connection that the government would have the police powers over. Because appurtenant, the right to make the milk is the right to sell it. I have a farm to market right, appurtenant the land, and appurtenant the right to produce. You have not put into evidence the right that I do not have the right to farm to market. The market's not the commerce market. It's the end user market. And that's, in this case, is smartly done, or intelligently done by private contract and, or, if I understand this right, might have been one more step further, membership. But see, they've got you down into that little bit because you didn't throw them off along earlier, so they got you down to where they got you. And I'll just go with that. The other thing that comes to my mind, as I see quickly, Vinny says milk is milk. And I understand you may be listening like a minute after, so let's not get into this responding thing. Just keep going with what you're doing, and I'll kind of respond as I do. Milk is milk. If they have taken a claim to the term, it's not. It's a legal term. First of all. Secondly, if you want to go the other way, you then say they didn't have the right to make and steal the word milk and make a confining, regulatory, authority over something that came of right appurtenant the land. You shift this to a property right. And the rights appurtenant, the rights pertaining to and extending from the originating right. They have you in the commerce side. You have to produce that they could not trespass that. That's what that's the first title question. The police powers thing is the only thing that they have to come as an umbrella. And if you're not causing your acts consistently do not address the total public, they have no authority there. You can fight them right there. Again, let me throw another one as it occurs to me as I start thinking about this is the land side. The grant to the land to you produce is the estoppel. It's a funny word, but it was just the term you use in the equity side. It's an estoppel against the government attacking you. Why? Because that grant of land to you and the use came from the government. And it's supposed to protect you, not attack you. They can only attack you on the commerce side. That's why they try to get you into a commerce act, the trading of it. But that's how you stay away. That's why your answer was to create memberships of private association, contract. Now they've figured out we got to go into something else. I'm not sure if you're listening to what I'm saying here. The milk may have been confiscated as a term to be regulated. They may have copyrighted the milk term. You can't use it. As I saw some of these, you keep bringing up a type of milk. I don't know what you'd call it. One of the techniques you'd use is just call it something else and make them force them to show you it's underneath their authority. Well, how did I explain that to you all a long time ago, even maybe, and some of you weren't hearing me, when the cops came to us while we were doing our work in the river, mining up uncommon minerals in a river that was supposed to be called a wild and scenic river. You weren't supposed to be there without a permit, all this other stuff. And the cop looks out and sees our machine out there that we use to collect up and concentrate this processing, work that's processing. And he said what? He said, I see a 4-inch pipe coming out of that down over there, and the machine was way out in the middle of the wide spot of the river, a long way away. It took us 5 minutes to come to the bank that they called us from, interfered our work. He says, I see a 4-inch pipe. Well, if you understand the regulations of what he was trying to do, the 4-inch intake is what they were going to try and get me to admit I had out there. Well, our machine isn't the dredge that they are talking about, and I knew I couldn't admit to any of its dimensions. What I also needed to do is defeat his ability to be a witness. If you understand now what I've been saying about you have to go take your knowledge and you have to use it to defeat their position. He's a witness against me, and he's saying at a distance he could see a hose was 4 inches in diameter, giving him the authority to speak to me. And I immediately assessed what he was doing. I realized he was trying to make up a list that's in the statutes already, which is why you need to know their statutes. And he needed to be able to check off on his list that there was a 4-inch intake pipe on that machine out there that he could start to build the facts in his witness that I would agree to that would allow him to say it was a regulable dredge in the river. And I just saw Vinny go through, say, moo juice. We're probably a lot closer to that. I know it sounds stupid, but any defense in an attack, okay? I wouldn't rely on that. I'm just saying that's what you just start throwing out this stuff to mess them up a bit. Just to cause them to have to think about it. But your more important stuff is the title, and you have to attack the title, and you have to attack their title of your claim and the police powers. That's the most important. But start throwing it out. Well, you don't have even prove that this is milk. We characterize it. I wouldn't even call it anything. We characterize it as mood juice. Okay, if you understand where that goes. But getting back to this thing, what I was telling you you can't allow them to define you underneath the statutes. In other words, if they've taken the possession of the term milk, you can't call it milk anymore. And you have to then create a way to avoid that. And he looked out and says, I see a 4-inch intake. And I looked at him immediately. I assessed what he was doing. I knew I had seen the list of things that they have put in the statutes. If they can find these things all together, then they can call your machine a dredge, no matter if it is or not. And that was the first thing on the list. And I looked at him and I smiled and I said, if you think that pipe is a 4-inch intake hose, then you don't know what you're looking at. Now, what did I just do? And in fact, what he was looking at was not a 4-inch hose on top of it. It was our intake hose, all right, but it wasn't our intake hose for the mining. It was our intake hose for the water. That's only 2 inches. And so he was looking at a hose that he thought was the intake pipe. It was our uptake pipe, not our intake pipe. That was only 2 inches. And I said, well, if you're looking out and seeing a 4-inch pipe, you don't even know what you're looking at. What did I do there? I took away his ability to be a witness. Now, what did I just say? Did you listen to what I just said? Did you hear it? Did you listen and hear what I just said? I took away his ability in that point to be a witness against me. Why? Because that's what the witness is going to go talk about on the stand, and I get to go in the future if he wants to put himself there. I said, well, didn't we have a discussion? You looked at the hose and you said it was 4 inch and it wasn't? Now I've destroyed his ability to be a witness. His questioning, trying to build the rest of that machine that I didn't have, ceased right there. I also took off at the moment the pressure of his continual pressing. Now, how do I relate that over to what's going on in the milk production? They've defined what you're doing, and you've agreed. You have to come in and say that's not what we're doing. I don't characterize my stuff by your terms, and I don't mean you make this a semantical thing. If they've taken the term milk and they've legalized it, you can't use that term. It's a copyright infringement at some level, and just accept that and move on. They've now defined their territory of regulation. But you have to take your knowledge and you have to defeat them at their requirements. Okay, excuse me. I talk about this and realize some people don't understand. On a machine for hydroprocessing minerals, we use all these different terms now. Here's the point. The term that we're avoiding right now is dredge. Why? Because dredge is defined under the Harbors and Rivers Act in the United States of America that's subject to and is used by the Army Corps of Engineers for channel improvements and navigation improvements and channel relocation. What the miner does with these little suction devices in the river does neither one of those. So they have essentially legalized the term dredge. It means it's a device, a machine for channel relocation or navigation improvement. So what we have is this little machine that looks like it can be described to do the same thing as their equipment. And miners didn't understand this little problem, and they walked themselves into agreeing what they have as dredges. In fact, they don't. I call them vacuum rummagers. It's not a dredge because they're defined to do a thing. They have a function. We don't do that function. But the uptake pipe is the pump, the water pump that provides the water and pressure, which creates the flow over the separator device, and the suction pressure. It's a Bernoulli effect pressure suction that allows us to, through a Venturi, the pressure from that uptake pipe to the pump creates the pressure that we can work with. So the water uptake pipe is just a water pump. It's not the intake for the material we're going to separate. And so not to get too wild on that. It's just the way the machine works that we use. But The problem is that when they defined what the function of a dredge was, when you don't do that, you best not use that term. And if you do, or you allow your systems to be characterized as these, and this is everywhere, not just what mining does, then you confess yourself into their authority. Now, I've got a little off point. The point is I'm trying to show you that if you start identifying with what they say you're doing, you've already given them a big hand up. And they're now staring you right in the face, and they have no right to be on your land, on your pedestal, whatever place you put yourself. So let's get back to the simplicity of it. You have to take what knowledge you have that's great and transfer it to legal terms. I know this is a big deal for people, but what is your 5,000-year use? Transfer it into a use, a tradition, and a custom, tradition, and a use. Long-standing, time immemorial. Use those words. That the party claimant coming in, or the claim, I wouldn't call him party, the claimant coming in it has not shown was not that long-standing general custom, tradition, and use, which the government agreed to before, and therefore cannot maintain and agree to hear a police power concern where it can't show a current area-wide problem through through this one subject matter called raw milk, which nonetheless you haven't really produced, given the association that's trying to monopolize the production of all milk, contrary to your rights, which is another felony, is saying that you do in order to do that. So even their assertion comes contrary. They're claiming a title to your production that they don't have. That's another felony. They're using the state's power to do it. That's another felony. And the judge that allows it, it's another felony. So you don't go accusing. You have to build that fact by demanding production and demanding the court identify in the record the things that you can answer to that would have to meet these requirements and wouldn't be causing these crimes in the record. In other words, you're speaking to building a record within the record of a denial of justice, which becomes what's known as a fraud on the court. It's not a fraud. It's a fraud on a court. It's the denial of due process. And the court can't allow that. If it does, it's part of another felony. So if you understand, if you're following what I'm saying, when I tell you that it's not what you know is important, it's how you use what you know, these are the things I'm talking about. I don't think I've ever actually got a little as detailed, and I know it's kind of fast, but even so, as detailed as I have before on this point. But see, I work better from finding a thing to work from than just talking in general. And I'm talking on a thing that I don't even really understand completely about, but I can tell, what am I working from? In some regard, I don't care what the underlying attack is. I'm looking at the remedy and what the other side claiming you can't do something you have right to do has to use in order to come and get you, and I'm looking at how to defeat that in them. When they're talking police powers, I'm not even looking at what they're complaining of. I'm looking at what does police powers means. And I'm looking at the elements of how that's constructed. And I look in and say, well, it's not area-wide. It doesn't come from one subject matter source or one exigent circumstance. It's not demonstrable, the exigence. I go through the list. And if it's not, then I say, wait a minute. I just come in and say, they haven't produced all these elements. Dismiss this. Or dissolve. In this case, an injunction, they dissolve it. It actually shouldn't even be a long-winded process either. And on top of the fact they haven't produced title, beyond that, they haven't produced title, they don't police power, then they have to have title. If they don't do that, then this is a fraud, this is a extortion, a felony extortion, and a felony coercion, utilizing the color, the courts, and the color of the authority that they're bringing. So you turn the tables right there, and you press it on them to show how it's not. Like show cause how it's not these things. And like I said, you use their weight against them once you figure out it's not the 5,000 years. That reduces itself to the statement of it being a tradition, a custom, and a usage. Long-standing, the government agreed to at some point when it was formed. It was also agreed to when the land was conveyed to the farmer. That's an estoppel against the grantor or the one who agreed and took on the custom and usage, which is the government. The estoppel was merely a fancy word to say you're stopped. You're stopped by, and then you bring up the principles. If it's a grant of land, it's a grantor cannot come against his grant. That's our United States government's Fletcher versus Peck case. We used to use that all the time because we used to talk in the grants trying to show people how this is so powerful. And now we've migrated over to the concepts of, let's say for the United States, the enabling acts, the cession of the land back to the federal government, the obligation and duty on the federal government to redispose back into private possession, exclusive possession, the things conveyed, so that there was no interference with these grants, is where we've moved on the same principle. More powerful. We went to the more organic, or if I can say organic documents. The origination of the states, the United States, is enabling acts. In there is a contract agreement that can't be changed. And the land is supposed to be disposed. So for Canada, you look at that as an example of how land is disposed into exclusive possession. And if you can prove that, if it's exclusive possession, what's their authority to be interfering? And the exclusive possession has to be stated to be tied to the production through the use that you're using. It's all lawful. The lawful production of the cow to make the milk, which is a lawful appurtenance, and the right to go to market with that, even if it's not generally commercial. There's a distinction between right to farm to market. We even have mine to market rights. Even timber people have rights to go from the harvest to the mill. It's not commerce. It's not your motor vehicle code for the so-called transportation. Your farmers' markets are probably your closest idea on how that actually works. It's right from the farm to a market. You have that right appurtenant, the grant of the land to you. And Canada doesn't have a grant. You better look at how to develop a grant so that you make this simple. I don't want to see anybody get tangled up. But anyway, so I've spent quite a bit of discussion. I hope, and I don't know if anybody on the other broadcast is listening. I just wanted to, it just occurs to, again, it just hits me, and that's, I get kind of troubled by it. I hear a lot of good ideas. I don't hear the ability to properly place it in the record. Now here's the caveat. Now, if you're in a corrupt system, you may not necessarily win, but see, you're making it a lot tougher for them to win, for them to make you lose. And then you have that as very foundational assertions against due process, which is really about the only right you actually have in a court that they have to watch out for. Showing that there's a fraud upon the court. Not fraud, but a fraud upon the court. The destruction of due process. In other words, the elements of that comport that cause the processing to be considered due process, and you have to find out what that legal term is. You find that it failed, and you identify that it failed to comport with due process. This claimant would have had to shown it's not the usage and it's not the tradition and a custom that milk, this cow product is. Moo juice. Being that the word has been confiscated by the state unlawfully, we're going to avoid using that because it looks like that's now a commerce term. Expose that. You go back to the police power. Nothing from the product of this. There's no position that the state can accept under police powers when, under customs and traditions and uses of thousands of years, it became to govern, whether as a de jure government or as the corporation it is. See, in your discussion, you can now expose this other side, the other commerce side that's beating you down, so that there's no usefulness, there's no use that the claimant can come under police powers. Here's another reason: the subject matter is not one that actually, since the word has been monopolized by the commercial system that the government is protecting and the judge oversees to protect, the product coming from, so I'm just talking the product of the farm, is not shown, there's no evidence in the record, has been shown to cause an area-wide concern which can invoke the imperative of police power. And you reference the record that has not been made, that is for the claimant to prevail, they would have had to show in the record these things. Dissolve this injunction. It's unlawful and it is a crime. It's multiple felonies. And it's certainly, with the lack of evidence going forward this way and the court taking jurisdiction, we have a fraud on the court being committed by the court itself. Make the assertion. Produce it in the elements of the facts that you state, and then make the assertion. Why? Because you make the record of the fact that there's no justice possible. You do it in a legal way. You do it in their way. You don't do it your logical, common horse sense set way. That's how they're kind of defeating us here. So I'm troubled. I'm encouraged with all this energy. I'm encouraged with the horse sense that's out there. I'm discouraged that it's not properly understood on how this is better applied to have the force and effect the horse sense makes on its face. That seems to be disregarded by these systems. I don't even know if they're corporate systems or not. They're just a bunch of gang members. Is an organized criminal syndicate a corporation? I suppose. An undocumented one? Are they a foreigner themselves? All these little things start popping up that you can prove. They have to be returned into a proper statement before speaking essentially to the evidence, and whether or not they've met the burden as a claimant or they've violated something in the assertion that they didn't have a right to do. If they're committing a crime before the court, call it out. This assertion is a crime before this court by these elements. Call it out. Don't talk your horse sense. Put your horse sense into a communication that has force and effect in the jurisdiction that has abducted you. Okay, I think I'm going to pause there and stop. There's a lot to say. Given more specifics, I could speak a lot more directly. I've given some generalities. Please don't walk in thinking that's a silver bullet. There's a whole lot more that can be tied together to really wrap this stuff tight. This is what I tend to do. What I just gave you is just the surface. There's so many more ideas that literally one sentences. If you knew the elements that they're coming against you and you defeat them by their own crime or the fact that they never produced the evidence for it and that the court's relying on no evidence and you can prove all that in the record, that's going to be your best record. Utilizing the fact of the grant to you against the government's ability to claim the harm is probably the most powerful. Once you said the first two, they have to have evidence that you violated even that. And I haven't heard in that case that they have, so I'm encouraged for them. I'm encouraged by the horse sense side, but I'm not encouraged by the performance side, and I don't like that you have to go through that. I'm on record repeatedly that this affront to property and production is the crime against you. 20 years worth. All these people you should assert against that property. Once you establish the grant and the right to do what you're doing, irrespective of any decision on the public side of its response to that product. Now you've created the chasm that they can't cross. But I don't hear that being presented in the proper way. Again, I'll stop. It all depends on how I look at it and what's important to somebody. See, I have to speak through their appreciation of their own case, and I don't have that at this point. And so I may not even be communicating to many of you all at all, because it's not, as I say, you make a problem that's a wrong you need to make right. You're real intentive. You're intentive and you're attentive. And I get to focus right on what you're talking about. So I can only do it on generalities. I was hearing a lot of cool stuff, but not properly before that court. I can hear how they're getting around Michael and those other people. I can hear it. I can hear exactly how they're doing it. And you're letting them do it. It's not a judgment. It's just it's the tactical response that you're not bringing that you had to bring. I don't like that you had to bring it, but that's one of your causes that you shouldn't have had to do this anyway. Because once you prove the point that they aren't rightfully before the court and fraud on the court is being committed, in fact, the failure of due process, and the judge never checked that, he's now in fiduciary breach. You now can make much bolder statements about how the fact is you should have never been suffering, that your land, you were supposed to live with your land in peace, not under the adversarial attack of the state who didn't have a right in the first place, or claimants who are covering for corporate interests, monopoly interests. And I'm telling you some words. I hope you integrate some of these terms, these words, these phrases in any work that you all might do. Just change the subject matter. It's the point that you're after. So again, I said I was going to stop. I think I will now. Let's move on into what's moving us in and through the world. And back in the 70s or so, I may not have been Well, I was young then, really had a good idea on the world, pretty alert to the world, pretty naive still, like most of us probably were, and had people tell me some stuff, and just really kind of being the big sponge at that time, and knowing everything, because I had more things coming into my sponge, I knew more, right? Well, we knew what we knew, and wasn't wrong that we thought we knew a lot, because we did know quite a bit, and we were pretty active about it. What we weren't pretty aware of, at least I wasn't, maybe you all were a lot more, a lot less gullible than I, there was this really, in-depth understanding about us and how we were going to be put in, mental perceptions that were not going to serve us. It's serving the one who had the plan. And I don't do much reflection because part of my memory is kind of absent. I've told you about that. So I can only pick up certain things. And then I went into the woods for a long time. So that was like 10 more years out of society, if you will. And then they came and they followed me up, and I said, well, there's nowhere to run now. I mean, if I was running, I wasn't running. I was just looking for a place to peacefully exist. And I'd learned enough now. I figured out, okay, I'm going to go into the mountains, and I'm going to set myself up here. I'm going to go into I use the international law, and I use the international sanctuary provision, and they couldn't touch me and didn't understand me for a long time. All they knew, it reduced down to that they just knew that I wasn't trouble to them and I wasn't doing dope. And I said, well, if that's our basic understanding, and that's all you think about what I do, and you leave me alone, I don't care. I'm here just to be left alone, be living in peace, look at the nature, enjoy it, live amongst it. But then the pressure got too much. And then I went and did something else, and when I came back, they stole all my stuff, and now I got nothing. And I said, okay, so now you can't go anywhere, and you don't want to have you live in peace. And I turned my attention back into, now what do we do? And by then I'd already understood about the occupying territory, the occupied territory, the occupier. International law was yelling at me about this condition right in our face. And that's the trick. That was part of the trick you don't understand, I guess. That's the original transparency is the occupier. If that occupier, whatever occupies you, does its job, it's transparent to you. That is the rule. Bring yourself on the land under cover of some pretense. Take it over and change the laws over time so that no one sees it. That's the best way to do it. That's the original transparency. And when I realized that, I started to see that what wasn't transparent. I started to see how things got altered over time. And these people are brilliant how they do this. And so that was in my mind as I was getting ousted, not so peacefully ousted, to having all my stuff stolen. The last bits of stuff I decided I actually needed in life. Wasn't much, but it was enough. Had to make my own water heater and did, they actually stole a unique design for a solar collector. In fact, they stole a couple of ideas that I had created I hadn't seen around. I needed them, so I guess I made them up. Not like I'm old genius inventor. I wish I had a lot more power to do that. I'm like kind of a frustrated inventor, actually. I can kind of do some stuff, but anyway, so I did that. They stole all that. So, it was just the basics. How do I make hot water? How do I make it simple? How do I actually make it more efficient? All that kind of stuff kind of comes to bear. I wasn't absent. I wasn't completely self-sufficient. I certainly wasn't self-reliant. I had to rely on outer world. But there was a balance of it all. And the underlying bottom line here, as I said before, is you want to get on a piece of land and live peacefully, doing what you wanted to do. And the United States law for appropriations of land and the disposal of all that is for that purpose. Why the sheriff keeps the peace. I've told you all of this before. But there's another insidious attack that comes transparent, the occupation that comes transparent to us. And I've touched it here, and early on as I was broaching the idea, early on I was naive and all this and told some stuff. Well, I had a family member, my uncle, he was into explaining things about the Bible and how that was going to reduce down. And he explained to me this thing called a cashless society. So my hat's off to him to point out this unbelievable thing with becoming honest then. Just unbelievable. How could that possibly happen? And then the last few weeks I've been exposing to you folks, it's here. So for those of us that have lived a while and got that word, it's kind of neat to watch. It's scarier than hell because of what it means, what it might mean, or what it might be tied to. And that's not even scary either, because let's bring on the Scorpion people, folks. I'm waiting. Scorpion people show up, I'm gonna start laughing. We got 6 months, folks, as soon as Scorpion people show up. Bring them on. If I get to see it, I'm doing pretty good. I may not have been quite as good as I was hoping. I may have to suffer for 6 more months, but bring them on. And so you get to this point, like it's not fearless, but it's not fear either. And so the Cashless Society was a prediction told to me by my uncle interpreting what the Bible was saying. For those of you that can hear a hint of guidance from the older books in what I talk about. And I try not to promote too much of that, and I can't because I have real problems with that document, especially when the people, and this came up again, it was kind of interesting, this so-called the Mandela effect. I think I understand it now. It's not a Mandela effect. This is just another psyop to myself. And I haven't talked with anybody that I've been looking at. I think we're just bad witnesses. And that's what came to me on the latest set of information that I truly thank for coming together, because it gave me a nice, concise, I don't have much time, so it was able to start analyzing some of this. But we're not very good witnesses, and it's known that people make bad witnesses on reality. And so I think that's the Mandela effect. But what came up was this issue of not being able to remember correctly. And watching the stuff come on to us and making up new, more uncomfortable facts or something that was more important to us and holding those as memories instead of the real things. That our perception is absolutely key to our downfall. And the wrong perceptions are easily made. Easily made. Why it's so big, I see it become so difficult. That in that proof, there was someone talking about the Bibles they had, that were wrong. And then they had the proof right in the Bible with going to the Greek, when the words weren't even the same. And I was, as soon as I saw that, I go, well, that has to be after about the 70s, because I noticed at the time, right after the 71 or 72, books just absolutely went stupid. Half the knowledge came right out of the books, if not more. And I was able to prove this to some people after a while, decades later. Like I said, no, here's what's the problem. You're not getting this information that I got. Because I remember this stuff, and now that you're not talking that way. Why? Oh, let me look over the book. But no, see, it's missing. It's not even in the book no more. And so this was the other insidious thing. That I look in the Bible, and it's just not making sense. It's just not there. And you start looking at the original languages and go, wow, this is a whole different story going on. Maybe not entirely so, but enough. Enough to cause the big conundrums. Which I can't not, and this is given, it's supposed to be perfect. I'm blaspheming that book, but I can't see that it's true. I can't see it's totally true. That said, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are truths to see in there. One of the big ones early on was Luke 11:52. Woe unto you, lawyers! You've hidden the key of knowledge, and those that entered in ye hindered. And I paraphrase. I don't have it before me. I'm just talking. But if you look at what that says, they said Pharisees and scribes. Everyone wants to make a big deal. No, those are the lawyers, okay? Those are the so-called lawmakers. That's what you have today. You hid the key of knowledge, and those that entered in you hindered. I am probably the definition. If you had my face, you'd probably see it in there if you knew what it was. That'd be the definition. I have been denied, 3 times now to enter into a court. They won't let me in. And I can only attribute to that because I'm on the road. I'm on the narrow path. Another truth. Dispersed amongst all the misstatements. And so, not getting too deep in that. Getting back to the Cashless Society, I'll get onto my tabs. The things that get past us is pretty amazing. Not that it really got past it. There's so much to talk about. But these weeks, I've been talking about this Cashless Society I was told about was coming. Back in the 70s, and no way, how can that ever, a global no cashless thing? How did they do that? Remember, this is right before computers were anything we could know about. How naive could I be without the knowledge of all that, right? And so here we are. Always that child in a way. Not like, don't act like a child, but, be childlike in your innocence, but be careful. That's used against you. But here we have more information, and quickly go through some tabs here. And an interesting response now, I appreciate, coming up with Jerry Day's latest video, and thank you to Gary L. for that, to see that. Cashless Sweden. It's already happening, folks. It's faster and bigger, quicker than I'd been understanding. But in time here, I'm talking on time, in time. Almost too late, but not quite. I gave you some lead up. We're really going to have to put our minds to how we're going to do this if we want to avoid this. In cashless Sweden, even God now takes collection via an app. In the most cashless society on the planet, even God now accepts digital payments. Now, the oxymoron of that is that we were warned against this in the Bible, if you call it the book, and the better parts of it, I'll have to say. And it'll be my ignorance of the parts that are all there that are good that don't matter. That'll be on me. That'll be what I hope will be my the wonder I find on how dumb I was. And I thought, no, see, if you just knew this way, this would have made sense to you. Oh, wow, isn't that, how dumb can I be, and how cool that is to understand the complexity and the dimension and how far-reaching that concept was. I just blew right by me. But I'm open to that education. And I can only hope that that's not a sin enough. And I don't think that we would have if we go into that center, that spot. Again, I'm really coming down to the point. I got 2 commandments to look at, and the main part of this is if you're not up against an oppressor, you're walking as an accessory to one. In the most cashless society on the planet, even God now accepts digital payments, if you can believe that stupidity. But there it is. There is a cashless society that's the most already, and they're taking digital payments. Well, I guess it all goes back to the source, and it's all to the giant electron, isn't it? Maybe this is God created, and I'm just too arrogant to understand that. A growing number of Swedish parishes have started taking donations via mobile apps. Uppsala's 13th century cathedral also accepts credit cards. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but we're told to avoid this thing. So these churches can't really be divine. Point is, they're in cashless now, folks. Just look at it. I was told something that was completely almost beyond my understanding. I just trusted I was being told the truth by my uncle, who it looks like was absolutely dead on. And here we are. Sweden, the most cashless. This is not an idea. They're actually converting people over. So even the so-called church, which is told to avoid this stuff, is involved, showing you it's just a religion. Mir-Mastercard. Not M-E-R-E, but M-I-R. Mir-Mastercard. Russian payment card is about to go globally. Out of Sputnik, so you can hear the inflection of the language change. Russia's Mir card. Mir means peace. What did I say about land? Your land, you want to just live in peace, right? This is taking this up into peace, and it's not. It's making war on you. But this is the cover. Russia's Mir card will be accepted all over the world in case of successful talks. This is all part of what they're selling to you as the schism in the monetary markets and the financial markets of the world. This is really just the continuation of the cashless society. I understand if I get more of this, you're only going to get one little link to just call my attention to it, just so I can talk to you about a little bit about it. That this is going to be the replacement for, even as we would have here in the States, the welfare EBT card, which used to be food stamps. That's just going to function. Their Mir card is going to function the same thing, showing you none of this stuff is any different. Welfare, food stamps is all part of the fictional debt system. Remember, the governments take GDP for this. This is their business, putting everybody in debt or using debt systems. So Russia's going to their cashless card. You're going to have a computer, or you're going to have a phone. Now it's a card, a piece of plastic. They'll move pretty quickly into being completely digitized. I guess the point for me is, okay, cashless, who cares? We got a problem with that big time for lots of reasons. I've talked about it. But it's invoking something that was told to me many years ago that has so much greater and dire consequences than just the fact you don't have money, given it's going down this track. We battle principalities and powers. And I'm not going to get all religious on you. I'm telling you there's some facts out in the world that other people believe are actually using to hurt you with, because they think they're the bearers of that light. that will guide you to things that you need, that are good for you. The do-gooders come through this fraud. Greece bans cash. Tax allowance possible only through payments via plastic money. That's an old story, folks. I drug that up my tabs. I go, wow, I'm going to have to take 5 minutes to drag through my tabs and put it up here to talk about it today. Forgot I was even back in there. It's so old, it was saying Greece is banning the use of cash the soft way. As of 1/1/2017, that's 2017, taxpayers will be granted tax allowance and tax deduction only when they have made payments via credit and debit cards. The new guidelines refer to employees, pensioners, farmers, but also unemployed. There's a ton to analyze in that paragraph with respect to my opening 45 minutes of discussion regarding land and who the farmer actually is. The farmer is not in that system. But you also understand they're also now making farmers, the producers, the livelihood that's exchanged for the production for the rest of the population, from which the rest of the population benefits, is taxed. That's a crime. In Greece anyway, it's a crime. But see, they've monopolized the monetary credit system. The debt system has made you a servitude. And what is the crux of all of it? The tax system. Your status is one of a taxpayer. There's another connection why this exists, and you understand when you're subject to that, you're subject to how the payment will be. That's why the FRN becomes so dangerous as well, even though when you know where to look, in the FRN is really condemned. And I have a 20-year standing, at least a 20-year standing question to a county, said, how are you demanding this when taking this in is condemned by federal law as payment for any bill, this FRN? If you don't think I've been looking for a long time for answers and no one can give them, I've been looking that one. But here, a tax now is required to use plastic. Now, my question to you, what if you started to consider that and show that, or understand what I've been telling you about addressing the administrative determination and mischaracterization and defamation of you, the man or woman, is not the taxpayer? Are you required to use plastic? Well, I want to leave it a question, but I have to answer, I guess. No. Now, what do you do? That's the problem. What do we do? And I've suggested we at least go back for our purposes to what the Constitution of the United States was showing us was a means of money with integrity. And not quite so changeable. And I think it was Von Nothouse, and I forget his first name, so I apologize because I think the guy has a big contribution. He did the Liberty Dollar. His main problem was he used the copyrighted term dollar. He shouldn't have used that. He should have figured something else out, I believe. But his system of addressing the change of the value, I think, is something that needs to be embraced in a system moving forward, that we need to embrace and get back to, and stop the stupid excuses that silver and gold coin are too cumbersome. Listen, you're either going to carry that cumbersome money that shows you're outside of the taxpayer status, when you also know how to do what I told you in the first hour of the broadcast, to any affront. You're either going to carry that burden of those heavy coins, or you're going to carry the burden as a human resource of all the other servitude they're throwing on you that comes with this cashless system. And I hope you understand what I just said there, why it's imperative to stop making excuses. We have to do what we have to do. And if that means we have to start carrying heavier coins in our pockets, then so be it. The other problem I have is not really the heavy coins. It's the change below, because you understand 1 ounce silver coin, it's worth, what is it? In commodity value, it's about $17. So you can't buy a piece of bubble gum with it, right? And so we have, I think really for us, the only real problem we have is any denomination below what like we would say a quarter ounce of silver would be, so 25 cents. So we're not too far if we would just go back to that money. Remember, the Fed takes gold and silver coin If it's not commoditized, and I think it's a crime that they did that, and I would attack that. Like I told you before, how did Arizona, how were they able to tax gold and silver when it's actually the production, the evidence of production of a man or woman's life under grant of the government? I'm pausing because I want you to think about what I just said in the milk thing. It all ties back the same way. That was a crime. That's a theft right there, what they did. But notwithstanding, they've removed that. And we move on over into that. It may not answer all our ills, but I don't know of many people beat down so far that's going to need much more than gold and silver coin in their life. That's our choice. That this Greece story, this is why I had it way long ago, it occurred to me to point out, you see that the tax liability, which they didn't throw off, is now connected to the cashless society. So government and servitude is taxed to the future cashless society. If I can help to take out any religiosity about this. And we can analyze it in lots of other ways. The bottom line is, it's the bottom line. It's a debt system, a servitude system, and the burdens of this debt you're going to carry on your back because you won't carry the load of coins, a few of those small load of coins in your pocket. To separate yourself and be separate. What do they say? The other truth. Get out of her, my people. Now, guy I admire a lot. I don't think he has quite a scope on the application of his knowledge. Like I would criticize the guys in Canada like I did earlier. And it's just really a critique. It's not a judgment. Move over, learn that stuff. And I think you can be like, you're going to be Babe Ruth in the field. There's no doubt in my mind. You're certainly going to make a game out of it, more than what they're handling you. Jerry Day is the same kind of a problem. He's articulate as heck, way more than I could probably ever think about, at some level. He makes some very good points, but he seems focused on, an inferior point. It's an important point. Like, let's say his, what does he say here? The radiation from the meters. Very serious. But when you focus on the meter on the wall and don't focus on the process that got that meter on the wall, you're going to fight that. You're going to lose the fight to the meter on the wall because they will never stop bringing what caused that meter to be on the wall. And you needed to attack the source of the problem. So not only do you have a proper thing you have to do, you have to you got to fight the right in the right territory. It's not wrong to fight against the health problems. It's just not going to resolve your problem. If you understand the subtlety. It's not so subtle either, but you understand what I'm trying to point out here. But I think Gary O provided a link to one of Jerry Day's more recent videos, I think. He asks the question on this video, and I'm going to have it in the Blogcaster, what comes after the FRN? What comes after the FRN? And he's staying in the video. What do you do even if you could end the Fed, or if it was proper to end the Fed? And there's a whole reasons why it's not unlawful, and there's a whole lots of reasons if you get into the law, what that thing is doing and how about it, and the how about it, and even the taxation part of it. I talk about this, but Jerry finally comes up with maybe getting more minds to it. He's of the opinion it's not going to help just to get rid of the Fed. In fact, it might cause problems. I've told you the same thing. But what he goes on to do, and I've kind of broached it here and there, the people that a lot of people rely on, the big names, if you will, and what present itself as alt media or documentarians of the truth and all this, staters of the truth, whoever you want to think who these people are, I don't know. I find, again, we're not fixing nothing, so I find lots of errors in what's going on ultimately in the end result. I don't need to know the past anymore. Why aren't we moving forward? And so Jerry Day brings this up. What comes after the FRN? And he puts the challenge out, which I appreciated. He puts the challenge out. I'll just read a few of the people. We know what the problem is. Why are we continuing to talk on it? When are we going to step up and come up with ideas on how to solve it? And I want you all to know about it because I think this is it's a worthy cause. He's going to make space for people to discuss with him on a forum of some place. This is the kind of thing I was hoping that the FN network would start to move in a natural sense. freedomsnetwork.com. The FN network could do this something like what Jerry's talking about. Jerry Day puts the challenge. Okay, folks. James Corbett, G. Edward Griffin, Ron Paul, Catherine Austin Fitz, Jeffrey Tucker, David Stockman, Mark Faber, Sherry Peel Jackson, Nomi Prinz, Paul Craig Roberts, Jeff Barrick, on, and in the comments there's even more names. I want you all to show up, and I want you to, let's work on solving this. Let's bring our ideas. Let's make something work. So he's calling out all the I would call the information gurus, who, a few of which I've told you have not really had the proper answer. We heard in UCY chat a discussion, well, we all don't know, and I have to agree, we all don't know. But then not to call out some of your errors in order to make atonement for bad imposition, or to make atonement for the fact that when you said something early on that was incorrect, set you up for the vilification you received when you had a whole bunch of people believe in the falsity you stated before. That all has to be cleared up as well. But come together, Jerry Day's challenge is come together and answer. What do you do in absence of the Fed? What do we do as a people? How do we come out from under, or come out of her, my people? How do we remove ourselves from this? You see, it's a taxation debt system. They call that prosperity under the A2030. But I appreciate Jerry's request. That's what I've partly been calling for. I think he does it, somehow he does it a little more, in my mind, he does it a little more authoritatively. And I'm asking you to consider that. Get the link to the video, you find it on your own, or you get on the Blogcaster. Listen to what he has to say. There's a whole lot more that has to be discussed. And boy, we got a lot of work, a lot of baggage to work through, it seems to me. Like I tell you, I believe a lot of people are just the walking wounded. And I think a more sanitary approach, starting from the basics and coming up, is going to be a lot quicker for us than try to work through all that baggage and trying to deny things that we're up against. Understand, if you're going to look at deciding what happens when the Fed's not around, you're having to acknowledge what got the Fed there, and it's still in power. Now, can we make decisions on our own, moving on our own in a unified concepting in order to make that irrelevant to us? I think is maybe a good start. I think my insight, at least at the point of an attack, or how to position ourselves in records or when we need to, or not step into a place by accident because we didn't understand these processes, is a help to that. Now, it could be I'm wrong when the better minds come together with more time to do stuff, but I'm only working on my experience, folks. And I don't see a lot of these people bringing up a lot of answers. They talk about a lot of problems, and I think I'm telling you how you provide the answers to yourself. Firstly, it's in the attack, like people like Michael up there in Canada. The attack, how do you stop that? Or how do you defend yourself? And anything, and more importantly, how do you shorten it up so it's not such a lifelong endeavor that never should have been anyway? Two, the greater thing is what's on us that we don't perceive. What has been transparent to us? What occupies our life that we have to throw off? And Jerry Day is asking for that. He's asking for all the people that think they know to come together and come up with some answers. Work together. I'm absolutely, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. What I've been saying. I've said over and over. You've heard me say it. If you haven't heard it before, I'm going to say it again. Someplace like the FN Network, the Freedoms Network.com is a place to start. It could be anywhere like that. But it has to start happening. You have to do something. We can't talk out of our opinions. There has to be some laid down foundation from which we're going to respond. We have to have the reasons why so that we always remember, at least in the back of our mind, we're doing it for a reason, and it's because of this thing over here that we never forget why we got into the problem we are, how the occupier became transparent and maintained that, and how they got us to be led by the nose to our own demise. That really has to stop. Okay, that was my opinion statement, because it really doesn't have to stop, because the law for occupiers means it doesn't have to stop. It could be one where you agree to put the ring in your nose and go walk with the crime against you. This is really not that hard a deal. What's been made complicated is how you make it simple. And I can't say I've got the simplest. I know I talk a lot to try and explain it, but really when I tell you If you came against me on a claim and you tried to tell me what to do on my land, and I know I have and I should know because it's mine, I need to know about what's mine. Oh, wow, I just did a double entendre. I'm a miner. Oh, my mine. What's mine? I know immediately you're a trespasser. Why? Because my documentation, my evidence says so. And I understand the background, the underlying foundation of all that document that proves it, and I understand that it's greater than even the words within it as far as what it can constrain in something coming against me called a government, or those inside using that pretense. And when a trespasser shows up, my first question to him is, where's your title? Let me see your evidence, the evidence that you have a right to even talk to me. Not that I'm being unsociable, but they're attempting to do a trespass. Now they're attempting to do some kind of deception. Taking away the police power problem for an instant, which I explained earlier how to start to address it. It's the beginning of how you start to defeat that even so. You ask, what's your right in title? Where's your evidence? I want to see it. Is the quickest answer I know to defeat somebody and identify them as a potential criminal. They can back up right there and they're not a trespasser. The attempt may not be actually a crime. It may be just a civil wrong. So they have at least one or two steps once you do that. But if you don't do that, you invite them to the table, your kitchen table for coffee. You've just let Dracula in the door. Now they become that criminal stakeholder that can interfere with you because you are now known to be susceptible to it. Jerry Day asks a question, what comes after the FRN? I'm asking maybe a little differently. Despite the FRN, despite the Fed, what do we do to protect ourselves? The Greece story tells us it focuses in on why the problem is what it is and where it's going. And we will have to avoid all that. We have to avoid the statuses. We have to start to know how. A lot of people that are in the movement were attacked under taxation principles. They're the walking wounded. There'll be no help. And then it's a problem of the problem of the occupying force being so strong. Those are all realities. So, in this case, I truly appreciate Jerry Day's request. I think it's something we have to do. I'm not so sure what kind of response he's going to get. I hope he gets a whole lot more than I believe I'm getting. In really rallying this thing together. Again, I'm just apparently not that guy. And I have conversations all the time about how people, the conversation ends up coming that, yes, I can provide a lot of research background. I can give you the tactics, the strategies. I can show you the terrain. I may not be the guy that can get out in the field and readily affect that. That's proven over and over. So we all have our place, and we got to be humble about that, I think. And it might be that people that do research cannot come up with solutions. My research happened to be on this process thing against us, so I looked right at the beast itself. I didn't look at the effects of the beast and how people get run down by it or chewed up by it or whatever. I'm learning better how and where that beast is going to be at a time and put a trap there for it. And I suppose that's going to, if there's ever a group getting together, and I don't mean a group like a name, I mean people with a concerted effort against, our own conspiracy against the crime against us. My contribution will probably be limited, as big as this would be, it'll be limited to those things, and that's okay. I need the people to speak to. That can move the next point. It's like I hand people a baton. Jerry Day is creating a space for people to get together to assess what their strengths on, to find out how that baton chain will be working. No, I'm not talking with Jerry, so this is all just my fantasy. I assume by his invitation that it could work that way, and it can work beyond that given the proper input. Now, the problem is that some of the names I have seen here, I'm wondering about their capacity even. And so, we have, there's a bit of distrust in all of this. And partly that is developed because, again, we really are so gullible. And we really are so apathetic, and we really do like the taste of that steak. make the pain go away. I'd rather have the taste of the steak than actually have to fight for being responsible and not and responsible enough to try and seek my own peace. That in the United States of America, regarding land law, the law of the land was supposed to be protected to us. The fact that it's not shows you have been divested of your rights and property and law and land by an occupying force that was transparent to you. They are lawfully violating you, if I can put it that way, in the accepted norms of how people are brutal to themselves, that fallen nature. One of these tools, and now we'll move into, see, this financial construct is part of the overall issue of moving this from what would have been totally astonishing to me in the 70s of hearing about a cashless society, and how does that happen? How do you do that on a global scale? This tiny rock we live on. The only thing we got. How does that happen? It's happening, folks, in my lifetime. What is this thing that's driving? It's those with the plan, folks, and the problems that we see are the plan, as I keep telling you. And there's a way to address that. But you have to be able to identify it. You have to make things non-transparent to you. We don't want transparency here. We want disclosure. Globalization and the rural-urban divide is a conversation I want you to go look at. I don't know what I feel about this, but I think it's important you read it. Charles U. Smith again, I don't seek these people out. It's their story, their titles and the storyline that comes up in the various feeds by email or Twitter or that must be it. I guess that's it. That's about all I do. Are what call my attention. Certainly, globalization and rural-urban divide would catch my attention. I've talked to you extensively about these things. This is what our lawsuit sued to enjoin, not by term, by how we sued to enjoin a method for its implementation. If you understand that, you're getting a lot better at understanding how you have to act in stopping this. We didn't sue a term. We sued the cause, how they affect this term, affect it into your life, cause it to affect your life. Globalization and the rural-urban divide. Charles U. Smith, I read this article a couple of times. I was really interested in how they got to it, but I'm not sure what I feel about it. He gets near the end. I guess my highlight for you is read through it, understand he's referencing to other statements, and it's still a question to him because he knows the truth, and the truth he asserts later ends up being what I've been telling you, essentially. And I understand from Grimner that this Charles U. Smith is like an economist-type guy. And again, I don't have any really researched it. And maybe that's to my failure. And maybe that discredits me a bit. I don't know. But I haven't found that it really concerns me too much more. To me, it's about getting ideas, concepts worked out so that we can put them in their place and move to stop those things. So it doesn't really matter. As long as it looks like they're talking in the right information, then we need to see that and move on. I'd like to distill this down through some very concise discussions and move on. The rural-urban divide is a tool. It's real. It's a tool. He senses it by other people speaking about it in a question, but those people speaking about it are speaking about it in a question to make you think it's a fiction. Oh, it just looks like it's working. Folks, it's real. It's a fabrication of something. It is the rule to bring on this globalization, and by that fractal, you'll see the nation state in a city, the urban area. And it makes the urban as the rural, it's a vilification, it's a defamation, a defecation on the land around the people of the countryside. It gives them a name. You're a part of a rural urban divide. You're now part of a thing when you're not. So I have a problem. I don't even know really more to say here about describing this. They started out, what interested me was the Democrats won heavily urban counties and the Republicans won mostly rural counties. And he goes through this analysis, which is, I can't say it's improper. It's just that it starts to utilize the concepts and the discussion of people who I think are trying to deceive you by explaining some of it, but doing it not quite right. Remember, our lawsuit in 2013, in implementation that brings on globalization, which we could identify in one other term called sustainable development, we sued both the Democratic and Republican parties as the tools. So starting out from this got me interested because I said, well, both of this is not right anyway. It doesn't matter what the effect of this becomes, because it's going to be a deception, which gets you to believe in a certain direction. But this article, nonetheless, is worthy of reading. You'll see that the discussion from the globalist trying to cause it to be this urban divide, does it exist or not question, we'll make a list of business and function as instead of the rural region being the countryside. He actually identifies rural region is a globalization word, as the economy or public service sector. He starts off with banks and post offices and council offices. That's not the countryside. That's this fictitious veneer. This is from what's his name? Charles U. Smith. This is from someone he's responding to, but he doesn't actually correct that in some regard. But they're looking at the economy as the urban-rural dividesters have created. The academia has created this. Just for your information, one of our knowledgeable miners that works as a coordinator for the Jefferson Mining District, we found out. Well, we knew it's called the program's called One Oregon. It's a urban-rural division tool. They were going to now go to a new university and put a full curriculum to put this in the curriculum. Our miner got word of it, went in, started to discuss the matter with 4 professors who were going to have meetings over the curriculum. And by about the 3rd or 4th month, after he had defeated every one of their positions and showed them they're all contrary to the law, he defeated that curriculum. They're not putting it in at that university. Shows you how you can take the countryside and defeat the urbanites, the academia, the ones that are trying to put this on, that will identify your local activity actually in an economic community sense. And they do not speak about the underlying producer or countryside, the people. The men and women and the producers. The countryside is the land, and it's the activity of the people on the land, not the derivative economics that comes from this or the government services. They're different, and yet this is what he comes to. That's why I'm not quite so sure how to take this, but I want to offer this, let you read it, let you know it's real. You can see what's going on. There's a lot actually in this, and maybe that's my confusion to try and talk to you here. I really would sit down a longer time, but he gets down to saying that why is this so? And then he says production and production employment are tradable. I'm not so sure I understand that either. I would have to talk with someone on this. I don't think they're tradable. He puts them in a context that they're tradable. Somebody else does. Michael Spencer does. But if you figure out that land is tied, your production's tied to land, it can't be tradable. It can be sellable. But that's to someone else who wants to use that land. And so I think there's something a bit amiss in this that he's adopting. The point is, he does come to finally the conclusion that your production and the totality of the derivatives called the businesses that come up in the localized economies is where the power is. And it starts in not the rural, but it starts with the countryside that's being destroyed. The people coming from the land to produce from the land that create the actual wealth from which derivative economies are created. You don't have that in turn. Remember, the mining districts in some counties started the counties. Without the mineral production and the derivative economies that brought in, they were the government. The mining districts were the government that turned out to be your counties in some instances. Without the producer, you didn't have this need to even have government for the government services to exist. The government itself was the mining district, which actually was protecting, again, keeping the peace amongst the miners with the claim so they didn't kill each other for the greed and wealth that's in the greed to get the wealth the greed that's within them to try to get this wealth, and that means to steal it, probably. A lot of hard work in all this production stuff. Specialized knowledge is needed. Not a specialist. In fact, you're a generalist. But the subject matter is very constrained. So, again, a lot of that, I don't know, I hope I said I hope I brought up some stuff. See, he uses terms like neoliberal corporate state order. If as soon as you start calling names, I think you're confining your decision away. It might be what someone uses, but I think that's to limit to create these really unmeaning conditions. Neoliberal. What is that? Like I've told you, it looks more to me this urban-rural divide is the new feudal, the current Middle Ages, folks. I wrote that, I don't know, 1999 or so, whatever. How long ago this was becoming apparent. But put neoliberal corporate state order, I think, is going to diminish I think that's done as a tactic. So I guess I caution you on those things, not just that. Strip the economic diversity from rural economies. Well, rural economies were made so they wouldn't exist. So you look at that context, diversity always makes a monoculture, whether it's economic or not. So you're seeing that statement, but against the neoliberal order that has stripped the economic diversity from rural economies is the statement of fulfillment of the globalization plan for that local countryside. If you've been following what I'm saying and inverting exactly what the meaning is, where diversity is the monoculture. You've stripped the land, the countryside, of its ability to produce wealth. That is the object of globalization. Using the tool and the fiction of urban-rural divide. So lots of fictions. We talk about straw men. These are all the fictions that come together that do all this to us. Another one that we move in the globalization effort. If you don't think it's all tied, I try to tell you about this stuff, and I'm going to move international. Show you how globalized it is. And just on the point that these so-called straw organizations are created and used as tools, surrogates, proxies, whatever name you want to do, of some other agent and principal. State Department, for all of y'all that got into the 9/11 and all this other stuff and had any arguments about what Al-Qaeda, Al-CIA, whether it was not, whether you agree it was CIA created or not, we have all the evidence now, but the State Department now, because it's a moving target, the straw man can change its spots. They've taken monopoly over milk, and so they can change milk to mean anything they want. They're going to take Al-CIA now is not a terrorist organization, says the State Department. Because of that now, because the Al-CIA is not a terrorist organization, it can receive CIA supplies. I mean, I could read all this on and on and on. If you can believe that. But this is a problem that we can't just say, oh man, they can't, this is nuts and how they can't do that. Oh, they're jerks and all, whatever cuss words you want to use because you got no other language to describe it. I've run out of cuss words. I said those were a long time ago, and I'm running out of adjectives because they're just all a bunch of criminals. Made it really easy for me. Now, what do? Okay, they're a bunch of criminals. Arrest them. How? That becomes a different question, but it becomes action. You got to start looking at that. You may not be able to, the same technique these globalists use, and they're learning to use, they may not be able to take it all at once. You can't, if you wanted to, you can't eat the elephant all at once, but you can devour that elephant over time in little bites. And that's what this incrementalism does and is, and this is how, in fact, locally, they've got a text Bill went through, they're doing exactly like that, and people don't see it. If they see it, they're not speaking out about it. And so this is in this case, the State Department now saying Al-CIA, is not a terrorist organization. Well, the United States doesn't consider itself a terrorist, which it is, so what do you think? These people are psychopaths, and they're using proxies, straw men. Those people that are fighting it they're real. They're killing people. They're doing it for their reason, but they are set up and allowed and provided for by this principle. And so, shake your head, face palm, whatever the word you want to use. The State Department now just recharacterizes, just boom, it's just recharacterized like they call you an enemy combatant. They just said Al-CIA does not, folks. If you got that, how's that work? They call you an enemy combatant, part of a terrorist organization called the People of the United States. You're an enemy combatant, but Al-CIA isn't. Has to say that Al-CIA is CIA is part of the government and it's not a terrorist because the psychopath, does not believe it's a terrorist. But you are. Think about this, folks. Put it in play. Where the State Department will rename CIA, they can name you They have the power to do so. They did, and you were crickets when I went to crickets. And I'm really having trouble time. I'm realizing it just, people just don't want to hear about this. They just, let me talk about the dancing unicorn and on rainbows and whatever the heck it is. They don't want to hear that. No, you don't want to actually hear that, but that's the essence of it. You don't really listen to follow through, to do what we have to do to start sending the message that we are not taking it no more at all. No excuses. And this is the Jerry Day suggestion and challenge. Okay, guys, all you guys that think you know something, let's move beyond now. And to me, I can't wait. I'm beyond, I keep saying I'm beyond media, and Vinny brought up beyond opinion. Yeah, I talk, and sometimes I maybe get close to an opinion. This is really just restating in different ways the facts of things. I suppose it's an opinion that we need to go back to the species that the people that knew about how people or other people are destroyed and said we needed to stick to like glue, and then we decided that we knew better in all of our stupendous ignorance. So I think we've got to go back to a foundation and say, okay, what worked and why, and let's stay close to that in the interim until the genius comes along and really fixes it for us. But cashless society, Bitcoin ain't going to get it, folks. It's just not. And here, I mean, I can't even imagine how on cue the rise of Bitcoin to over $2,000 of Bitcoin now is to induce you into believing it's a value. Remember, there's no value behind any of this. It's all in your perception. And so was make it up. Just like Jewish nation state bill, Israel is going to call itself a nation state. Even though it's been recognized internationally, it has no place. It's committing crimes. It's an occupying force. Talk about that occupier coming on and changing the laws that make over time that you can make. They're just going to assume they can call themselves a nation state. Under international law, that requires I think 2 more witnesses of national status to agree. So that you all know what international law requires on that. It's going to require 2 nations to step up. We recognize the nation state in your territory. Well, I hope there's a holy outcry about that. But that hasn't happened. But these people believe it. They believe that they're a nation state. Now, I say that's under international provisions of the UN, because they're actually not nation states unless you're a member of a subverted body. So understand how this all works down. But the Israel Knesset parliament, their parliament, has hurriedly passed a new bill that defines Israel as the, quote, national home of the Jewish people, close quote. Although the association between Jewishness and Israel goes back to the foundation of the state, the new law also carries clear discriminatory elements that target the country's Arab communities, numbering nearly 2 million people. I won't go on. You've heard me say about this, but there's a lot of problems in this state. Remember, the Jewishness was tied at the state. That's 1949? Yeah? Religion was attached to the state. It's not even a state, folks. It's just this acknowledgement of a place that a bunch of brutes and bullies ousted some other people to impose a group of people with the agreement of Hitler, whose first officers were Jewish and beat down on their so-called fellow Jews, which were a different persuasion of Jewishness. Remember all that study we did behind the Woodshed? This complete criminal activity that's going on. They're telling you here Jewishness was attached to Israel at the state's so-called state's foundation. That has to be 1949. It hasn't been a long-term, time immemorial connection. It's a fabrication. And if they were, my thought is on just looking at this state bill, well, if Jewishness is tied to the state they want to call Israel, it's not Israelite. Remember this. Remember all this connection. It's not there. Jewishness is a religious belief. If that's what they want to do, is to make a state for a religious belief, our example of that is the Vatican. How about we just find some place and give them 234 acres and they could put their Jewish state there? If they want to put it near the Dome of the Rock, fine. But make it like in the corner. If this is a religious state, we find out a religious state only needs about a couple hundred acres in order to function. These people are saying they're a nation state. That's you claiming to be God, folks. That's you claiming to be the emperor of the world, the emperor of the universe. That's all this is. And yet it gets traction. They get you to believe there's actually a Jewish state. It's just to be a religious state. And it's only existed since the state existed. What happened to them before? They were never a Jewish state before? Then how could they be one now? Creates so many questions that I'm sure that these noble ones, that they will call themselves chosen ones. That's a racist statement on its own. When you find out what the books are saying, they're not so high up in the category when you get to knowing them. And that's not to put down anything that they want to believe. I could care less about what someone believes that way. But when you start calling yourself something in order to go do and harm other people, I have a problem with that. They are an oppressor. They're an apartheid oppressor. They're a racist. They now have admitted they didn't have a Jewish state before, and it wasn't even tied to Jewish until they formed it and made it up. We've talked before on all the problems, how they even got there, what their problems over the land there, and it's not exclusive to them. They have a problem with the Semites, the Arabs, which they are hurting and harming and killing and stripping of their land as an internationally known occupier. The problem is they're not secreting themselves on so transparently, are they? That these little upstart religious state now that only needs a couple hundred acres actually to exist. And I don't know if the example of the Catholic Church will actually be a good one. I don't see the Catholic Church, except for all its pedophilia agencies out in the world, it doesn't attack anybody openly either. It gets you to agree to its impositions. It does that more peacefully. It does get your consent. Now, I know the historic fact of the armies that went to go put the will of the Vatican on other people. I'm not going to go there. That's obvious. That's also showing you it's not very godlike. Not given the commandments I see they're supposed to be done. So the whole thing is on its head. And we keep engaging all the stuff that's the effect and not the cause. That we get to the point when this little upstart religious state that only needs a couple hundred acres actually comes out with a minister and says it's time has come to assassinate Bashar Assad. Israel Housing and Construction Minister called for the assassination of Syrian President Bashar Assad following yesterday's U.S. Department report that the Syrian regime was using a prison crematorium to hide mass killings outside Damascus, the Jerusalem Post reported. Remember, that crematorium was found to be a building that wasn't at all. These people, not only are they war criminal occupiers, they're false witnesses, and they're advancing the provision of killing people's democratically, if you can use that word for them, democratically elected officials. And he's a housing minister to show how psychopathic these people are. Well, this guy is also underlying, he used to be a general, so that should tell you about this militaristic state is not so religious. I don't even know where to begin when you start hearing people calling for the assassination of somebody else. If you want to live in a peaceful world, or if you expect this Jewish state, this religious state is a religion of peace. But they call for the assassination of people. Should have been condemned before it even hit the wire. And I mean condemned into non-existence. Otherwise, you agree with this. Otherwise, you agree that people can be called to be assassinated, which you know happens by crazy people doing this all the time. But we're talking this is a state function of a people that just declared themselves a state having no authority to do so, that they're recognized as a criminal occupier of a foreign land. Put together by a criminal act of gangland activity between the United States and Britain. And again, Hitler. He was saying, listen, go ahead, take them out of here. They declared war on Germany, take them out of here. I got some Jewish officers here that don't like them either. Get them out of here. We did all that study, folks. It's not even a question. That they go down and now they're calling for the assassination of world leaders. Is that the kind of religion state you want to have having influence over your country? Too late. Okay? I did a little pause there. Too late. We've been talking about all this Zionist influence for a long time. Too late. These people influencing the White House call for the assassination of world leaders, of other people's leaders. Open problem. Open criminality. I told you before, the United States, in its, the 1912 NDAA said we went extrajudicial. That is the reflection of it. Open call for assassination of whomever they want. And this is supposed to be a peaceful, law-abiding people? We really have a gut check to do and a principle check and a spiritual check here. And then the bodily check. What do we do to start to put our part of the wrinkle in the skin of this thing to make it not look so shiny? Doesn't sound like you do much over there by doing it here, but I'm going to suggest to you that it does work that way. There will become a mindset that starts to come on that we don't tolerate what's going on in the system, that we find the occupiers already occupying us. That ripple will start to go out. Eventually it starts to condemn this entire stuff. And that's given we have the time to do it. If we don't, we are just agreeing to these oppressors being in the world, and I suppose, we'll be condemned for that. And so we go out on tools, how they use these tools is a bunch of real people killing a bunch of real people, all used because they've been pumped up by their own Psyop to be the proxy thing that they want to do. Tools are being used by the globalization power structure everywhere, about every place. Everywhere is in your mind as well. See, every place is typically where you exist there. But we have more evidence of how this thing goes. I've been watching something going along in the news, just keeping track of it. You heard a little bit about the story, and if you haven't, they've been telling us that there was going to be a security risk for having laptops on airplanes. I think I might have mentioned it quickly. They were going to ban international flights for having laptops, and it's been going on for quite a while. That Iran was a country that offered on their flights their own laptops, so that people on their planes can use laptops. Now, I don't know how much I would have trusted that, but they did offer. I thought that was a pretty nice gesture, given if they were, not as brutal as that can be. And I'm not saying that they're brutal more than the United States is, or Britain, or France, any of these other lunatic psychopath countries are anymore. But they offered laptops because international flights had laptops been banned. They're now trying to ban them, I don't know if they did or not, in the United States and on all flights. They've been building a concept that these laptop computers are somehow a problem. We even heard it with the Lavrov condition, and that made a big old uppity deal. Some crucial secrets were given over by Trump to Lavrov. All nonsense, and we'll maybe get to that or not, I don't know. But this laptop thing has been coming. It's been a little seed that's been going through. I've been watching. Now, what are they going to do with this? Well, here's the next thing they're going to do with it. And they're giving you an interesting deception to kind of consider. The FBI arrests passenger who tried to enter plane's cockpit with laptop. FBI arrests passenger who tried to enter plane's cockpit with laptop. In the entering statement, they talk about he was standing there with his laptop, going to go into the bathroom, which was near the door. And so if you listen to that, so we tried to get into the door with a laptop. Well, okay. Why would he waste his time? I mean, why would he carry that if he's just trying to get in the dang door? But why was he then, in the first statement, going into the bathroom with a laptop, makes it sound like he can hack that door? And so this starts to build a narrative. When you read the story, however, it just so happens this guy was near a bathroom. He did have his laptop. He did want to go in, but he wasn't going to use the laptop to get in, and it wasn't actually big enough to act like a door ram either. I noticed that this story wants you to lead your mind that these laptops are a tool that's going to be used in airplanes. They want to keep building this idea about these laptops being able to do something on an airplane, which I just want to point out just the fact of that. This seems to be another Psyop building. I don't know where it ends up going. I don't even know if it goes any further. But I want us to be prepared to hear if something does come up and come out about it. It looks like it's been building to get us to believe that it could happen. In fact, it'll be more like a hoax or false flag. Remember, right before that, too, there was a story that, United Airlines happened to let the code out on the door. See, there's just too much here that was too focused about this story, that this little thing trying to get us convinced that, they're trying now. They are on the planes with their laptops, and they're trying to gain entries to those cabin doors to make you think, I guess it's valid. I need to put my laptop away. I need to put it in the cargo hold. I don't know, folks. We're being played too many places and too often. Again, my idea is to look and see how transparent the deception is to us and to start to out it. All the FBI has been saying and all the nonsense that's going on in the news, they keep us focused on these bright, shiny things, and they're all lies, and we don't call that out. We let it to continue. And even though there's evidence that we could use, and then we don't use it. As I say, the doing part. No proof. Clapper, Yates offer no evidence of Russian election meddling. I'll just stop there. There's no evidence of Russian meddling. We also, though, have that the disclosures of Vault 7 was that the programs that are being used, that was all electronic interference, could have been done, and most likely is done, to cover the CIA and SA doing this, or to blame other nations for doing it. But the Clapper and Yates, these are Attorney General Yates, she's the one that was fired, because she wouldn't perform the duties that she was told under her beliefs, but she was fired from her job, say that there's no proof of any intermingling of this. And yet, the CIA, the FBI and the Russians, FBI and the NSA and all the government and the media always pretend that there is something, and we don't rise up to say, knock the nonsense off. I mean, it is kind of embarrassing, isn't it? We just play it off. That's just nonsense. These jerks and all this, whatever expletive we want to call them. That's not good enough at all, folks. The FBI guy just got fired, Comey, losing his game with another non-news leak. These leaks come out and they're not even news. There's another article. They're not even bashful to throw out things that somebody else will pick up, be the false witness on a lack of witness, and continue the problem. And to me, it just looks like us being silent on the process side, the procedure side. And as long as we are absent to do it correctly, it's evidence we won't be able to do it correctly. And as I heard today, and wanting to respond to my first hour of the broadcast, it doesn't sound like we are responding with our knowledge correctly. So to me, it's really observation. I'm saddened a bit because I know if we don't do it right, we are just going to go down the path that they've established. And the things that we could have had available to us, at least even so to our offspring, will not be available. The do-gooders will have won, and they're not good at all. They're the people that will will call for the assassination of people. They're the people that will vilify you for being a heretic. They're the people that will claim that you are causing harm to their protective precious. They'll give it a name, Gaia. They'll talk about it in terms of, this is what you're doing. It's all baseless. And you don't respond against it to show how that affront is actually a crime. I've told you before, again, listening to me explain this, everything those people do has no basis in law. You should be able to call it out pretty quick. Just find out where it broke that law. Breaking. Putin offers Congress transcript of Trump-Lavrov meeting. Over this whole thing, it's such a joke now. These Russians really play this really well. I really have to admire it. Because of this thing and this Comey issue and the discussion regarding the Trump offering Lavrov some secret information, which happened to be the laptop information, and they might have exposed some internal type of intelligence gathering thing, a bunch of hoopla, never produced any proof of that either. Putin offers to the Congress a transcript of the Trump-Lavrov meeting is the height of snickerdoodle and gameplay and embarrassment for the United States. Why? We had our own transcript, didn't we? But these people, Putin and the Russian government is starting to call the United States out for its buffoonery. But it's worse. This is some high standard stuff. I really want to believe in the world we hold high standards for the representations of people. It used to be called statesmanship, diplomacy, in the most earnest way. And it used to be really, really serious, because if you made mistakes, you insulted someone, it meant people died. Now death seems to be part of the process, part of the equation. But that's not necessarily so for Russia. So they're now taking every advantage. What an embarrassment. Obviously, Congress said we got our own transcript. We don't need you. But the fact that the Putin and Lavrov are so much on this to provide this embarrassment is the key to this point. And worse, the Trump leakers about this issue have only made things worse. Another discussion, you get a link to it. When you look through this, it wasn't the only things that can be talked about this, but this article brings out the people like the Post and the New York Times, Washington Post. They are causing the actual crimes that they are complaining of doing, and we're not calling that out under some fiction called the right of freedom of the press. Well, maybe, but maybe not. And I'm treading lightly here on stopping the freedom of being considered a censor, but you don't have the right to yell fire in a theater is said to us. It seems to be the same point. You don't have the right to say things that causes trouble, that causes international incident, that causes the government to have to answer to your defamation. That I wonder where the line will be that we can get back to being focused on what we need to be focused on, instead of having the entirety of all of us being all focused on the things that we're being led by the nose by. And we continue to allow that. I think I'll stop here today. Thank you for tuning in today. Maybe got a little bit longer, but I appreciate you do tune in, those that you do. I hope you can use some of the things I suggested earlier in the hour on how you move this through, what you're focusing on instead of your knowledge. Your knowledge is important, but it has to be put in a way that brings force and effect to what it means in the remedy that's coming against you, or you might use on the other hand. So thank you, Grimner, again, all you do on the reallibertymedia.com, our broadcaster and the space and archives. And then Gary Mary, the Spreaker account, thank you very much for allowing us to put account of things there. And then there's SoundCloud and iHeart folks. And freedomsnetwork.com. Jerry Day is saying, come here to our forum. Yes, go there. Do that, what I was saying. Maybe also start a similar type of forum, not to get too thinned out, but maybe at freedomsnetwork.com. Let's work that. And Jules at ucy.tv, thank you again for your simulcast, pastcast, prodcast, recast on Thursdays. And all you do there to keep that going and keeping the word out. And then the terrestrial broadcasters, I appreciate what you do there to keep that out. Again, terrestrial broadcasters, if you want a higher bit rate file, you try to find the Spreaker account. It's twice the bit rate there. And this was BTW RLM 215. And I just forgot to say that. I'll have to maybe change that around on the edit. So thank you very much. I'll talk with you next week. We may be running into maybe next week, may not be. We'll see. I'm still tentative on that. We're going to try, but we'll see. Just to let you know, it might be a file, but I don't know. Next week, tech diffs or nature willing.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
Well, that's what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.